This reading is from Rays of the One Light, parallel commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. Oh, the following readings are from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Each week we read from both scriptures as prescribed by Yogananda ji and his guru, Sri Yukteswar ji, who was guided by Babaji to compare the two scriptures to show the same underlying truths between them. This week's reading is titled Self-Reliance versus Self-Reliance. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Last week, we considered the need for attunement with God, with the Gurus, with the wisdom of others, until we make that wisdom our own. There is a strong and, in fact, valid belief nowadays in the need for standing on one's own feet rather than depending weakly on others to carry us by their strength. Swami Kriyananda was once asked, "What is the best yoga posture?" "That one," he replied, "which sets you squarely on your own 2 feet." Our strength must come from within. If that strength comes from the ego, however, instead of from soul consciousness, it is like a guitar string without its sounding board. The notes it emits will be thin and feeble. Our strength must come from within, but it must be coupled with the recognition of our inner link with broader and higher realities. The Bhagavad Gita says in the 10th chapter, "Everyone in this world whose life is glorious or prosperous or powerful, know that his achievement is but a little spark of the great sun of my effulgence." Jesus, in talking to his disciples, emphasized also the power of attunement with his own consciousness as a ray of the divine. For this ray had descended already through him in response to their devotion. It was a sign that God was already listening to them with receptive attention and did not require to be wooed in that way any longer. In the passage preceding the one that we read last week, Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it," me, meaning removing the fruits, "that it may bring forth more fruit. Now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me." This was the meaning of Paramahansa Yogananda's counsel also, when speaking more intimately to the disciples of the need for attunement with him. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
From Whispers from Eternity. This is, I beheld thee hiding behind the flowers. I looked at a flower and prayed. Suddenly, O Father, I beheld thee hiding there. It exuded to me the perfume of thy presence. I saw the blush of thy purity coloring its petals. It was the gold. Sorry. Okay. It was the gold, thy wisdom, that shone in its heart. Thine all-embracing, upholding power filled its delicate calyx. The mystery of life and the immortality lay in the pollen, lifted by the bee when it tasted thy sweetness. O teach me thy wonders of creation, which are hinted at even in the tiniest roadside weed. Today's reading refers to attunement. And attunement really is one of the more subtle subjects on the spiritual path. It's not something that we necessarily have a lot of experience with. Maybe we do if there's some particular, every now and then someone might. In one way, in other words, we might feel a feeling of being in a flow, of somehow being supported, of somehow being connected at times, either with God. Sometimes you can be in attunement with another person, and so you can kind of feel that your thoughts are going together. There's a certain connection that comes from time to time. Incidentally, if you do feel that with someone, Swamiji's advice was, how did he put it? Basically, never assume that you have telepathic communication with someone, even if sometimes you do. In other words, sometimes you can be so in tune with someone, you sort of feel connected, and you can think that that will always be true. And therefore, I don't even have to bother to explain myself. And it's not true, meaning better to, out of respect for the person and out of not presuming, just still put your thoughts into speech, especially if they're kind. If they're not, maybe you can keep them. But Agnel, do you mind moving just a little bit? I'm sorry, I need a clear beam. Okay. Sort of every time you would slide, or perhaps sort of like the sun coming out, not from behind the cloud, but from something. So the, what is it? Ote Seven? That's exactly what I said and how I said it. Is our new Tamil word for attunement. We had to sort of find a word that would match it, because what does it even mean? Master himself used, or really created, the word attunement, or at least brought it into common spiritual language. One way we can understand it literally, what is attunement? What does it mean to attune? It's very similar to tune. But if you think about it, one thing you do when you tune is you tune a radio in ancient days. Now you click on a radio. But if you can think back to the times of the early days of Kali Yuga, we had our radios, and they had knobs. They were analog, not digital. And so you adjusted the knob till you got to the station that you wanted. But you couldn't just go over to the radio and just go, that's what I want. You had to listen, right? You had to listen for where it was. If the radio was off, you could turn the knob all you want, didn't do anything. And sometimes kids would go throughout all the stations at once. But if you're actually wanting to hear something, you have to turn the knob and don't laugh too much. It'll affect me. So if you turn the knob, you listen until you get what you want. Even then, you have to refine it till it comes, then you get it really clearly. So you always have to adjust, but listen to match. So you're sort of matching the station. You're not really matching the station, but you're finding the station. I was jumping ahead to the next thing. When musicians come together to tune their instruments, anybody can, certain instruments you can just sort of play if you're by yourself. But if you're playing together, then you have to make sure that when we press one note on that instrument, that it sounds the same as on another instrument. When they're separate, you can't tell. A guitar you have to tune because you can hear it relative to itself. So therefore, you have to get it one string to match other strings, another example. But when musicians come together, one person will play, whether it's the flute or the violin, play a particular note, and the other instrumentalists, they adjust their instruments while listening. See, they can't just say, this is how I'm going to do it. You do what you want, I'll do what I want. Then no one will like it. You have to listen and match. Similarly with singing. when you sing together in a choir or in any other way, you can sing how you want, but you have to listen to the others and make sure you're matching. Otherwise, it won't sound as good together. And I'm sure you've heard groups where they're singing, but the voices weren't quite matching. And it was sort of an enjoyable masala, but it wasn't quite exactly, what it would sound like if they were matched. So that's what attunement is on a basic level. And so that's what we do with the guru. We attune, we listen, and we adjust. You see, we don't just do what we want without any reference point. We listen. So that's one thing that's needed for attunement. On the other hand, if we just listen, it could be called listening. There's no action in there. Attunement means you also act accordingly. So anyway, the thing that is so vital, in fact, it's mentioned in the discipleship vow. It says, I don't have the whole thing. It's the last lines, but yeah, I can't remember, but it says before this, but it says, teach me to attune myself to thy ray, meaning thy ray of light from the divine. Teach me to attune myself. So there's another point. It isn't just that we have to know how to tune the radio to master's station, or how we have to listen to his instrument and it's either you know or you don't know. We ask for help. Teach me to attune myself so that we get help, basically help me to listen better, help me to act better. You can imagine when, your maths instructor gives you an exam and you bring the exam up and you say, teach me how to solve this better. And they will say, no, that's over. Sorry, you're on your own. Master will never say that. You can bring it to him 100 times and he will always help, as long as you're really listening, as long as you're doing it with love, which you are, if you have any sense at all, which we all, in other words, we do. In other words, I thought of an exception. Some people just brazenly acted carelessly and when they were with Master, and they just said, he will protect us, he will protect us. They wouldn't take any caution, normal cautions, like locking the car or, other things when they were out. And Master said, let them try to drive off a cliff and see if I help them. So in other words, that wasn't tested. But the point is that, we don't want to, again, presume, as I was saying earlier. We don't want to act careless or with lower awareness, lower energy, saying he will take care. You see, sometimes we can have high energy, high awareness. We can feel really deeply connected and we can say, I know he will take care of me. I don't have to worry about this problem. Same behavior, but it's coming from higher energy, expanded awareness, an open heart, not from lower, passive. You're just asking him to do all the work. And so many things between basically tamasic energy and sattvic energy, the outward behavior is more or less the same. How can you tell the difference between he will take care versus he will take care? There's no real outward difference, but one can be said with low energy and one can be said with high energy. But both even are quiet. It's not, he will take care, that's rajasic energy. You're sort of affirming it, right? Hoping that it's true. But once you feel it inside, you say, no, I know he will. And he does, but also it has to be built on your experience. Master said, you can take one step beyond a leap of faith, one leap of faith beyond your current experience, but not many leaps of faith beyond. In other words, it's sort of like, hey, I was about to cross the street and I heard a voice say, stop. And I stopped and then a car came out of nowhere. And so I was saved. Great. Thank you, God. So now I'm going to try to jump off this building and fly away because God will help me. That might be too much of a leap. And so again, we can take one step beyond. Otherwise, Master said it's presumption, saying God is with me now. You are with me. So again, you will take care. That's not loving. That's sort of like asking, the help, the staff to take care. God is not staff. Now, the thing about attunement also, though, is that anyone can develop their attunement. It's important to remember on the spiritual path, we all come with a certain amount of understanding, a certain amount of devotion, a certain amount of attunement. There's no way really to know about ourselves or others. It does not correlate with how many years you have been on the spiritual path. It may correlate with how many lifetimes you've had on the spiritual path. Probably it does on some level. And how does it correlate? If we've had, say, X number of lifetimes on the spiritual path, we have lots of times to blow it. A lot of times to make terrible mistakes and go, let me not do that. And what is a mistake but an opportunity to learn? And a lot of our learning is really trial and error. We tried this, it didn't work. How do you know if that's happened to you in the past? Because you don't have an interest in doing that thing now. This is true not just in the spiritual path, but in sort of life in general. You may be seeing somebody pursuing a course in their personal life that is obviously destructive, either to themselves, to other people, and you sort of wonder, why don't they just stop it? Can't they see? And then, another question to ask is, why don't I do that too? And if we feel, well, because I can see that it doesn't, or even if you hadn't seen 10 examples, for example, of alcoholism as just one example. Suppose you hadn't seen 10 alcoholics, you just had that instinctive, better be careful. This is a troublemaker. It's because we've done it before. Master said it's the only reason why you have a disinclination for certain activities. You did them before and found they didn't work. Similarly, sometimes when people come onto the spiritual path, since we're talking about attunement, some people will have a concern about leaving the spiritual path. Sort of, now that I'm here, I want to stick with it. I want to make sure that I don't ever leave. And it could be because of other experiences in this life. But, if it isn't, for some people, it's their first time on the spiritual path. I just wonder if it isn't sort of past memories of, I was doing something and then I kind of got pulled away from it, and then life wasn't as fun, wasn't as good, didn't go so well. So this time I want to stick with it. We have to be careful, though, that doesn't make us too rigid, and that we're not just every step, I'm afraid I'm going to step out of line. It's common in the beginning when we're new. But on the other hand, we should be careful. It's a moving target. Some people are not careful enough, just free to do all kinds of things that angels wouldn't dare, as the phrase goes. Jumping in where it says fools jump in where dangers, where angels fear. Thank you. Where angels fear to tread, to be careful. But on the other hand, we don't want to be so worried. Just God wants you to be happy. And remember, he wants your happiness even in little things, even in relationships, which is not a little thing, but I mean, worldly things, life things. He wants you to have a good time, not just suffer. Good, you must be learning. No, it is through suffering often that we do learn, but suffering shows a wrong understanding in us. And all of us are filled with wrong understandings that are in the process of being corrected. If that were not true and we had, that was my last wrong understanding, they are all now right understandings, we would not be here. God would not have us here, both to learn and to help others. You see, that's another way in which we grow. Now, as I say, attunement is subtle because it's not, for example, measured by hours of meditation. Master's most advanced disciple, Sister Gyanamata, I always point over here. I feel like maybe we need to have a picture of her over there. Sort of, I'm always gesturing as if she's there. Anyway, one person said they felt she was Saint Teresa of Avila in a past life, and that was the song that we chanted, "Let Nothing Disturb You." It was written the words were Saint Teresa of Avila. Avila's in Spain, so Avila probably. But anyway, so she, in any case, whether she herself wrote to Master, whatever I was in any past life, I am now in this life, Gyanamata, the product of your hands. She had such great devotion to Master, and she was very wise, very strong, just as it said in the reading, to be strong in yourself. She was very strong, but with Master, she was always just like a child and open and very sweet. And he himself said, I only have to hold a thought about sister, which is what he called her, Sister Gyanamata. I only have to hold a thought about her, and the next day I receive a letter from her on that subject. And so that's how close their attunement was, that she could hear his thoughts and he could hear hers. You say, well, he could hear everybody's thoughts. He said that to Swamiji. I know every thought you think. And Swamiji said, far from being a little like, every thought, he wasn't nervous. He was glad. He said, how else will I grow? How else will he be able to help me? Swamiji himself, sometimes something would happen in the community and people would say, oh, Swamiji, he would say, what happened? Did you know? And they say, well, yeah, but, I didn't want to bother you. And plus, it was someone else's personal thing. And Swamiji said, if I don't know, how can I help? Sometimes he would know intuitively. Sometimes people would have dreams of him giving them advice. And he said, it's advice that I had wanted to give them. So who knows? But other times, how it panned out, he said, tell me so I can help. Master said the same thing. If there's something wrong going on here, it's your duty to tell me right away. And we could say, well, Master, can't you just put your mind here and you see all things? I think that's true too. It wasn't necessarily that Master was saying, inform me. He was saying, you have to be open to me. You have to bring the problem to me. It's for your sake that you do it. So never think that you're bothering God, you're bothering Master. Here's Master, and he's like, okay, I have 10 messages from Napoleon that I have to get through, and then after that is Sindhu, and this is going to take away, where's my coffee? No, he has just one phone for you, and he is always answering. There's no trouble that way. It was funny for me because with Swamiji in the body, he did have that only so many hours in the day limitation. And if he was putting in his mind in a certain direction, like on a project or a book, and you brought up, remember that book 5 years ago? I was wondering about, he would just say, not now, because he was focused only on this book. He was in a fully creative process. Then when he would finish that, then he was more receptive to other things. But he knew the power of concentrating on what you're doing until it's done, because when it's done, it's done. And when it isn't, it isn't. And sort of, we got a little bit here, we got a little bit there, I've got this idea here, and it's all sort of half-baked. And so in fact, it was funny, the other night, I had a dream where I was walking ahead of Swamiji. We were in some public function, but it was sort of being put on by somebody else. It wasn't like Ananda Chennai or something. And so I could sort of say, well, hello, Swamiji. It was just, I was sort of there, but trying to stay out of it because it was really someone else's show. And then somehow I turned, or somebody said something, and he said, finally, somebody's speaking to me. I don't understand. I'm right here and no one's talking to me. And so I turned to him and I said, greeted him, and he looked at me, and I realized he was saying, why won't you talk to me? And I had this thought, I don't want to bother him, and this is another situation. So I'm glad to be here, but I'm also kind of keeping a respectful distance. And he was saying, why? You see, in the body, we have certain protocols, we have certain limitations. You could say, okay, great, now I will follow you back upstairs, and what's for lunch and all that. No, but in terms of now, there is no limitation with Swamiji, with Master, no limitation. You can just be, you can ask, and they are ready and waiting, and they're also pursuing you. It's not just a one-way thing. But this attunement is something we have to work on and work on and work on. And the more we do, the more things become easy, but it's very subtle. You can say, for example, level 1 is this technique, level 2 is deepening Hong Sa, the technique is Hong Sa, level 3, you learn about discipleship and Lom technique, get your sadhana up to 90 minutes. All these things can be measured. For lack of a better word, you can't really measure spiritual progress. Some people, anyway, you can't. But the point is, we have to make it fair. And luckily, we don't have to do anything. We're doing what Master did. So you're meditating 90 minutes, and then, You can take Kriya initiation, then you build on that. You can increase your Kriyas. You can take the higher Kriyas, higher Kriya initiations. And it's all very sort of clear what the steps are, what it takes to achieve them. We don't have any attunement levels. Once you are attuned this deep, then you can go on to the next level of attunement and so on. And everybody, it can, it's easy to measure. It isn't. And so you have to be very careful in presuming. In other words, we should be giving to all. We should be open and friendly to all. But even on the spiritual path, you will find people with differing levels of attunement. And it is not a basis for comparison. It's a very personal thing. And sometimes we won't even know. Remember Mirabai, she, of course, is famous. And so Master told the story of her husband who would never talk to God, never speak of God, nothing. And then she always felt badly that here she sort of was drawing whole villages to God with her singing and stories and everything. And yet her own husband didn't ever talk about God. And then in his sleep one night, she heard him saying, "Oh, God, my beloved." And she realized, oh, he does love God. And then in the morning, she said to him when they were awake, she said, "I know, I found out your secret." He said, "Please don't say it." She said, "I know what a great lover of God you are." He said, "I'm very sorry you said that." He said, "I made a vow that if anyone knew of my love for God, I would leave this body." And he sat in the lotus pose and Bakalam, he left. So too bad. So, that's not the point of the story. Don't worry. But the thing is that some people don't. Are we ready? No, some people don't wear their devotion on the sleeve. Some people were very attuned to Swamiji, and yet they didn't sort of show it in their outward behavior. He said, some people I'm closest to inwardly, I almost never see day to day. They're busy doing other things, or they live someplace far away, but inwardly, they're very much in touch. Master said that in Autobiography of a Yogi, the two boys in penniless boys in Brindaban, that chapter, he met that one disciple of his who said, "You are my guru," and helped him. And do you remember his name? Pratap, that's right. And so Swamiji asked Master about Pratap, that he said, have you been in communication? And Master said, since that time, not outwardly, but inwardly, he is kept in touch. Isn't that nice? I mean, do you want Master, ask Master, Prem ask Master, Agnel Yepadi, how is Agnel? And he'll say, inwardly, he's kept in touch. He can tell you, because inwardly, he's kept in touch. Or Vani, or, Ravi, anybody. You see that inwardly. So make sure Master can give Sri Yukteswar an update on you. If Babaji comes by and says, "Mani Mekalai, Yepadi, Saukyama," then Master will say, yeah, inwardly she's kept in touch. Yeah, I heard from her yesterday. You know that sometimes people ask you, have you spoken to your aunt? Have you heard? Yes, we spoke last. Oh, okay, fine. So you want same thing that Lahiri Mahashaya is asking Master, have you spoken, to Prasanna? Just all the time. And so make sure that Master can say that. I'm being silly, of course, they all know everything, but still make sure you're in touch. There was a sweet story of Master. He was sitting right next to his nephew, and his nephew at a banquet in Calcutta, his nephew was 15 years old and he was Master's favorite. And so it goes. And Master, meaning so it said. So Hare Krishna had a particular sweet meat, special thing that he was saving on his thali for the end. And he was talking to the person next to him. And when he looked back on his plate, the thing was gone. And he knew Master well enough at this point to know, and he wasn't going to say anything either. So then he continued talking with a friend for a while, and he looked back and it was back on his plate. So then he turned to Master, and Master said to him, he said, "You'll talk to everyone, but you won't talk to me." I mean, just think, he's eating next to Master. I mean, now we would just, sign me up. How much do I have to pay or whatever, just to have tea with Master? And here he was. But you have to understand, in the moment, people, it's easy to take these things just too lightly. And that's one thing, for example, I was always with Swamiji, whenever I was with him, I tended to just sort of even stare at him because I thought, how many of these opportunities am I going to have to be with him? It was many years. But, in a public function, I said, what else am I going to look at? The sky, the grass, the other I mean, I was aware that so many of the people around me had decades with him and had all kinds of meals and teas or whatever. And I knew that I hadn't had that much time. And it was only, for me, it was only 15 years, but it wasn't 365 days each year. And so, I mean, I remember one point I was just sort of staring at him, perhaps a little bit too ardently. And, across the whole, gathering, he put his hand up. Hi. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I had to break it up a little bit. but then later on, then he didn't do that. It was sweet too, because I saw there's a picture of Master in a gathering in a group photo, and Swamiji's in the back, and you can see Swamiji's just staring right at Master. It was really lovely. In fact, I felt badly about that, staring at Swamiji almost greedily. But then I heard in one of his talks that he said whenever he was with Master, he would his full attention would be on Master. It really couldn't be on anything else. So, but let's try to do that with, again, hearing their voice. For a moment, I thought, well, we did a song, Move All You Mountains. Maybe we don't need another song as a song. But then I was talking to Prasanna, who had done all the hard work of printing these things out and picking the song. And I say, you know what? We're not going to have a song. And he was very dignified. And then I said, wait a minute, but it'll be Swamiji singing. We can hear Swamiji's voice. And yes. And in fact, it was needed. Again, any memory of Master's voice, Swamiji's voice, is not the same thing as the present reality. Just listening, it will heal you. It will strengthen you. And that's what attunement does. You could say, gosh, is attunement just tuning my radio to hear my marching orders and then marching and carrying them out? Well, even if so, that would be good. But no, it makes us strong as people because we are resting on true strength, which is God's strength. It's God's world. It's God's reality, not ours. And if we attune ourselves with him, then things go much better. Even if you were just following orders, if you were hearing them clearly enough. Sister Gyanamata used to run up and down the stairs doing Master's orders, following Master's orders. And some of the younger nuns said, you don't just have to do what he says, you have your own will. And she was older, and she said, well, don't you think it's a little too late to change? It was a very polite way of putting it. Remember, most advanced disciple, woman disciple. But then she said, and I have to say that I've never been so happy before as I am in following his will. And so if you want his guidance on things, ask him. And then try to feel for a response in your heart. But as you grow on the spiritual path, like as I said, be open and giving to all, friendly to all. You show your attunement by being a friend to everybody as much as you can in a giving way, and patient with them if they're sort of acting a little prickly or whatever. Again, as much as you can, appropriately, within your sort of, as much as you can do sincerely. And remember, that's how Master was. Master, there was a disciple of Master. He was actually a celebrity, a movie star. And whenever Master would invite him to lunch, he would come and then he would say, I want to learn the techniques. And Master would say, well, Walter, Swami Kriyanandaji, will, have a meeting with him and he'll teach you. And so they would make a meeting and the man wouldn't come. And it wasn't as if Swamiji said, come to my apartment. He was meeting him, across town in the public temple far away from where Swamiji lived. He would get, take the bus or whatever it was, get there and be there, and the man wouldn't come. This happened many, many times. And after the last time, they would have lunch. Then the man would miss the appointment with Swamiji. Then they would have lunch with Master again. And after a few rounds of this, at one more lunch, the man came and Swamiji said, I just had it with him. I wouldn't even look at him. And he might tell a story, and Swamiji was unresponsive. And after the man left, Master said, how dry you were with him. And oh no, sorry, before this happened, I'm sorry, at the beginning of this lunch, Swamiji told Master what was happening, and Master said, well, today we'll have fun with him. And so, you're sort of like, do you have a bat or something? Or, like, what kind of fun are we going to have? And then Master was so kind, so patient, even more sort of loving than usual, perhaps. And then but Swamiji was unresponsive. And at the end, Master said how dry you were with him. Where would you all be if I treated you that way? You see, he wasn't making it a condition of anyone's sincerity. All of us are sincere, and all of us have a long ways to go. And so should we sort of, where we are, do we just, oh, you're nothing? Maybe Master would say that sometimes to people if it would motivate them. But he would never say it that he meant it. I mean, these are the people God sent to him to help, all of us included. So again, be patient, but on the other hand, sometimes you have to keep your distance. You have to understand that too. It doesn't really help the person, especially if they're behaving rudely. It doesn't help them to sort of invite that rudeness by being in their presence. They'll be busy being rude to somebody else. Don't worry. They'll get their rudeness. They'll have their rude fun, but let it be with someone else. Keep your distance. There's no need. There's no obligation. There's no yes, but. And if keeping this level of distance isn't working, then keep more distance. And just be in your own spine. And if sometimes we will think, but it's not fair, it's not right, especially if it happens in the spiritual family, just that we're all seeking God, we're all aligned, and that's true. But remember, if you have karma to work out with other human beings, if you have that karma to work out, something that can only be worked out in relationship, God is going to have to use the people around you. And so whoever is around, that's how this karma will come. And so, you could say, well, then I'll go hide in a cave, and then I can be all alone. But who knows? Maybe the animals will start being rude, or, maybe somebody will move into the cave next door and chant their music really loud. I mean, who knows? So the karma has to come until we grow, but that doesn't mean that we have to engage with it. Sometimes we just have to be still and let it just flow by and say, I know what is true, and really not really relate to it much. You see, every now and then, you always keep your ear open in case there's some truth in it. Because Swamiji, for example, someone wanted to meet with him, and all she did was just sit and sort of talk nonsense. And she kind of had a gift for talking nonsense. And he found himself sitting with her and kind of looking at his watch, thinking, how much more of the nonsense do I have to endure? And then he thought, wait a minute, God is with everyone. I hope that's not what you're doing right now. Okay. Yeah, I can relate. And so he looked at his watch. He said, oh my gosh. And then he said, that's not a humble attitude. He said, God can speak to me through anyone. So let me listen to what she has to say. And he said, in that moment, she gave him a piece of advice. She made a statement about Ananda at its present step of growth that was very important and something he needed to hear. So be aware of that, but always from a position of strength. We don't want to be too open to something if it's agitating us. We want to say, Master, you filter this and you be with me in this. And not just if they're saying it, it must be true. If someone says something, it must be true. They must mean it. They must be sincere. They must be honest. Maybe, maybe not. I had that problem actually when I was new on the path with anybody, whether on the path or not. If they said anything, I just sort of thought it was true. And I thought it was true for me because they would say a bunch of things to me about me. And I said to Swamiji, because it was causing me all kinds of trouble, because they were a lot of what they were saying is what you are doing is wrong. And I said, Swamiji, what can I do about this uncomfortable? Well, what I asked him was, I said, why? I feel that I love people, but I fear them in their power to hurt me, is what I said to him. And he said, well, you make the mistake of thinking that other people have your best interests in mind. He said, they don't. They have their own best interests in mind. Very few people will actually speak to you or give you advice or anything relative to your best interests, if they even can. It's not even that they're being insincere, but most people will say, be like this so it no longer bothers me. And so then he said, until he said, you no, what I don't, he said, make sure to listen to your own intuition. And I went, because that's what I was so full of self-doubt. Any intuition that I had, I didn't know if it was right or if, it was against something else. And it was actually a big thing he was saying to me, but I wasn't able to take it at that time. So when he saw my sort of panic, he said, and speak to people whose opinion you respect. And I thought, I have been speaking to anyone for any opinion at all times. I'm not really gauging whether there's a need to respect the opinion. And by respect, I don't mean respect the person. Everybody deserves respect on that level. But did they have the same experience that I had? That I've had? Did they have a similar sort of interest in life or basis of comparison or conversation, or were they just spouting? I remember one person sat me down. He was from Chennai, actually, but he sat me down. This was at MIT. And he gave me an hour-long speech. Basically, it seemed like it was from the Shastras as to why I should not live for God and why it was all nonsense. And so I was talking about, but Sanatan Dharma, and he said, your pronunciation is very quaint. And I, okay. And so, and then then I don't know how it came up, how this could come up, but I was talking about the yogis who have such control over their bodies that if they've eaten one thing that disagrees with them, they're able to reproduce it and eject it without going into the details so that it no longer bothers them. Rajarsi, Master's most advanced disciple, he did that too. And and this man looked at me and he said, I see you are a true believer. And he, after this hour of not being able to convince me, he said, well, you probably have to go through it to discover on your own that it's all false. And I thought, that might be a victory, because that means you'll leave me alone, right? Until I do. So, and that was it. The other thing too is if people are badgering you, remember, most of the time they'll just lose energy. They don't have that much energy to devote to you. So they'll sort of burn out and go on to other things. So the last thing I wanted to mention is these words from the Bible are so beautiful, but they have to be understood. And they're not really clear in our language right now, necessarily. I am the true vine. Now, maybe there were vines full of grapes all around. There is in that part of the world, but you can think of vine as tree also, like a fruit tree. So you say vine, huh? Angevine. You just, no. Tree then, fruit tree. So I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman, the one who harvests the fruit. Every branch in me, Jesus is saying, so he's saying he's the tree. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he take away. Now, he doesn't chop it off and burn it, like he says in other words. It's just he's taking it away. And he's not even saying, really, God takes it away. Somebody's with the master, but not really receiving. So God takes them away. Maybe yes, maybe no, but that's above our pay grade. The thing is they take themselves away by their other interests, their other attraction. And remember, when they take themselves away, it's for a time. And then they come back. This lifetime, next lifetime, we're all ending up in God. So any sort of going away is temporary. So nothing to worry too much about. It can lead to a lot of suffering that would be unnecessary. Master would try to beg some people not to leave. But if somebody had their mind set on it, he would let them go, probably because, like my friend had said, they have to just go and discover that this too didn't work. You can't spare people from their lessons if they need to learn them. Our parents, our children, anyone we care about, sometimes certain things, they just have to work out their own karma. We can pray, that helps a lot, but we can't just transmit and say, you could be spared so much suffering. Some of the greatest lessons we have learned, haven't we learned the hard way? Every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, as Prasanna was explaining, he harvests the fruits that it may bring forth more fruit. And so again, it sort of, as you grow in attunement, it sort of well, I was going to say it snowballs, but snowball is not a good image for Chennai, but it just builds and builds and builds and builds. The idea of a snowball, if you roll a snowball downhill, as it rolls, more snow sticks to it. So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes down. So this is the thing. As you get in tune, the more you are in tune, the even more you gain in attunement. And then he says, now you are clean through the word which I have spoken to you. And remember, as Master said, anytime there's word, the word, W-O-R-D, written, it means vibration. It can mean the Om vibration, but it means vibration in general. And that's how it was with Swamiji all the time. We were in his presence, whether he spoke to us personally or not, whether he spoke in a group like this or not, whether he was just there, we felt clean. He talked about that in Master's presence, that he came with questions and that he would sit in Master's presence and the questions would all go. Not because they were answered necessarily, but that impulse to question even was soothed and calmed. And on some level, maybe he did know the answers or he knew where to get them. And so that feeling, I always wondered, when we were with Swamiji, he would speak a lot and we watch a video of him and he speaks, but it isn't as if everything he said I can even remember. But somehow I just feel cleaned afterwards. I feel uplifted. I feel purified. And so it's almost as if in that speaking, literally the word, but that vibration, that's a part of how they help us grow, because it comes to us and it uplifts us. Because you could imagine, well, why don't they just come and they sit quiet in there and we sit quiet, and maybe that'll help, and maybe it would. I think it would. The first time I met Swamiji, he said, there's a Kriya initiation happening tonight. So let's, instead of me giving a long talk, let's just meditate. And I hear it for the first time and just can't. So he gave a talk and then he meditated. It was not much of a meditation for me. I was just too restless, but it was life-changing. And then he says, abide in me and I in you. Live in me and I will live or live in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except that it lives in the vine, the tree. See, the language is that. It's sort of, you can't have a branch lopped off by itself and say, hey, fruit. Kudu. You know, it has to be attached to the tree in order to have that life and that strength. He says, no more can you, except that you live in me. And so as Master's most advanced disciple, Rajarshi said to him, Master said to him, never forget where your power comes from. And Rajarshi, smiling like a little child, said, I won't, Master, it comes from you. God bless you.